Hello there. My name is Jasom Jensai, as those of you watching know, but some of you might not. And in this stream, we're going to be discussing Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. How good is it? We're going to be discussing how powerful is Darth Maul, and also we're going to be discussing what is a true Jedi like. So before we get to all of that, though, let's start with the question of the stream. Who is the leader of the Night Owls during the Clone Wars? And for those of you watching live, you can already see Noah Logs has joined us in the chat. Thanks for showing up again. I love seeing you here, Noah. It's great. General Kenobi, yes. Common response. I love it. But let's just start off with Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Just got done watching it. Super fun. This, it's been my favorite episode for a long time. I've always loved Revenge of the Sith. It's just such a good movie. There is, like, Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back. Those are also good episodes. I love watching those too. But Revenge of the Sith has probably been my favorite for the longest time. So, yeah. Yeah, it is a sad movie. And I think that's part of why it's so good, is because it gets that emotion right. I'm just going to start right off at the beginning. One of the reasons it's so sad is because you see the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan and how good it is in the beginning, and then you see it, like, get destroyed by the end. And that's because you see the goodness, you can experience the sadness. So the beginning, I love the beginning, the Battle of Coruscant. You get this awesome, like, drum beat stuff, and then starfighters, and I just love it. Star Wars is, as Dave Filoni has said somewhere, I think, don't quote me on that, but Star Wars is, like, it's really about the story. Like, you have, like, the X-Wings and TIE Fighters. Obviously, you also have the prequel ships. There's a lot different names, not as simple. I like that sequel name, Starfighter names better, but you have all this stuff like lightsabers and Jedi, and that's just like the outer coating. What's really important is the story. But even though the story is the real important thing, I still love the outer coating, as some would call it. All those ships, all the blaster fire, Anakin, which I suppose is part of the story, is his character, as he doesn't leave Obi-Wan behind. That's one of his character flaws, even though it could be seen as a character strength. And it's actually kind of interesting to see how one of Anakin's greatest strengths, and that is his his determination. He doesn't give up on people. His hope, you could say, ends up being what turns him to the dark side eventually. When Sidious manipulates him to not give up on Padme, to not give up on him, and basically just turns him to the dark side through his hope and his love and his just his emotions, I guess. But yeah, the beginning is great. You get to see them take on General Grievous. The one thing that I don't like about, maybe not the one thing, there's probably several things that I'm just not thinking about, but one of the things that bothers me most about the introduction, is actually, it'd be fine if it came out like when it first came out, but having seen the Clone Wars and seeing that Anakin and Obi-Wan have battled Count Dooku several times, it doesn't really make sense for them to say, this time we will do it together. And then I was about to say the same thing. Like, it's, like, that line doesn't make as much sense after seeing the Clone Wars. And then later you see, what is it? During General Grievous is attacking Obi-Wan, or, I'm getting this backwards. When Obi-Wan is attacking Grievous on Utapau, and basically, I don't remember what it was. He basically says something that seems to imply that they're meeting for the first time, or they just met recently. Oh, you know what it was? It was basically Grievous saying, "You underestimate me. I've been trained in your Jedi arts by Count Dooku." And that's not a good line if you take into account that Obi-Wan has battled Grievous several times during the Clone Wars. So, I mean, I still love watching the Clone Wars. I still love Revenge of the Sith, but that's just one little tweak that just bothers me a bit. another, but moving on from like the Battle of Coruscant, they land, and again you get to see Anakin and Obi-Wan. The relationship has progressed from where it was in Attack of the Clones, with their banter about, oh, I'm not brave enough for politics, and then like arguing about whether Anakin had saved him 10 or 9 times. That's such a Anakin and Obi-Wan thing to argue about. And then Anakin meets with Padme, and Padme is pregnant, which I guess is great news. I haven't experienced that, I guess, so can't really relate that well. But I'm sure it's great news. At least that's how they portray it in lots of stuff. But anyways, they have great news, but it's tinged by the sadness that it's a secret, and obviously you can't really keep getting pregnant a secret. So it's great to see their acting on that. And the prequel acting gets like a lot of, I don't know, like it's criticized a lot. But I think that's mostly just the dialogue is a bit stiff sometimes. But actually, I saw a great video about the dialogue. I don't remember who it's by. I'll have to try and remember to put that in the description. But it basically explained how even though the dialogue, like George Lucas's dialogue, can seem super clunky and like it just doesn't really work, other times, like Star Wars also has a bunch of iconic lines, like "Hello there," "The Force is with you, young Skywalker, but you are not a Jedi yet." Like all these lines are so good, and yet people criticize George Lucas's dialogue. And there's this great video about it, about why that is that he's so good and so bad at the same time. And I'll have to link that in the description after finding it. But yeah, it's the acting in the prequels, or really throughout all of it, has a lot to do with like the actors' expressions and body language. And the scene that like evokes this idea the most is when Anakin is waiting in the council chambers, and Mace Windu is like trying to arrest Palpatine, and it just looks out over at where Padme is, and Padme's looking back at where he is, and there's this eerie music. It's great, and people have said this a million times, but Revenge of the Sith is a great movie, even though people like label it like a prequel. It's a bad movie, and that is a bit unfair because I do like the other prequels. But yeah, I would say Revenge of the Sith is closer to perfection than it is to prequel, using prequel as a negative connotation. And that's just my opinion about it. But that's, I guess, to answer anyone who's questioning what I proposed, or the question I had in the thumbnail. But yeah, I think it's a great movie. You have, after Anakin tells Padme, and then what happens after that? I believe after that, why am I blanking? I guess it just goes into like Anakin getting put on the council and all that stuff, which isn't really that interesting. It just kind of shows Anakin's like descent and part of why he's turning to the dark side. You get to see him having his visions. You get Palpatine like talking to him about how good he is and how deserving of power he is, and how he's not getting enough from the council, and the Jedi just don't trust his power. And here, I'll give you a gift. I'll put you on the council. Boom, you get the rank of master. And then the Jedi are like, well, you didn't really earn the rank of master. Frankly, you didn't earn your seat on the council. But we'll accept the council, just not the rank of master. And instead of seeing this as, thank you, I do not even deserve getting on the council, because of Palpatine, like, pumping up his ego and basically telling him, oh, you deserve so much more. He, instead of seeing it as, thank you, I'm on the council, he sees it as, what? I'm not a master? And I do think it's a bit awkward when he, like, makes such a big deal out of it. Which, I know, in Legends he wanted to go to the restriction section and all that, but, like, even so, like, who would, like, basically talk back to the 11 most powerful Jedi? Like, even Anakin probably wouldn't. I don't know. It just seemed a bit out of character for me. Maybe that, like, again, it's just a subjective opinion that I have, and there's not much I can do about that. Not much you can do about that. I'm just sharing my opinion. What was I gonna say? Right. So then you see more and more about Anakin and his fall to the dark side. You see his visions about Padme. And you know what? Quick theory time. You've probably heard this one before, but Palpatine, I think it's fairly likely that Palpatine is the one who put Anakin's visions of Padme dying into his head. After all, he did know about it when he tells Anakin, hey, I know you're having these visions, and I could save you, or save your wife, I mean to say. Yeah, so it's definitely possible. I could see Palpatine having that sort of power. Snoke does a similar thing, and Snoke is created by Palpatine. So it just kind of makes sense as a thing for Palpatine to do. And Palpatine has, like, the motive to do that as well. It's not just like, yeah, Palpatine could have been the one who was force choking, what's the guy's name? Whatever, Admiral Darth Vader choked in Episode 5. After all, you see him force choke people across the galaxy all the time. But it's like, why would he do that? It's not a good theory because he doesn't have motivation. But in this case, Sidious has motivation to make Anakin fear for Padme's life because fear is the path to the dark side. Which is another thing you know what? I'll get into that later. Yes, I'll get into that entire thing later. The thing I'm going to talk about later in the third segment of this show is Yoda and Anakin and their whole talk about Padme and, like, Padme's potential death and all that. And what the Jedi, whose fault is it that Anakin turned to the dark side, basically. Yeah, I'll get into all that later in the third segment, but for now, let's move on to just the Clone Wars. Like the Battle of Coruscant, you get to see the Battle of Utapau and the Battle of Kashyyyk, and I think that's awesome. Again, it's not like the main story, it's not like the most impactful part of Star Wars, but it's just an awesome part of Star Wars, and you get to see, you don't get to see, like, what do you call it? You don't get to see a ton of Jedi fighting battle droids. You see, like, Obi-Wan ride out on his, I'm blanking on the name, that, like, green lizard beast. If you know the name of that, leave a comment, leave a chat. It would be much appreciated. But yeah, that, like, green beast on Utapau, you see Obi-Wan ride that into battle. You see Yoda standing on the, like, battle strategy, hut? I don't know. What are the Kashyyyk houses called? I don't even know if they're named. Whatever it is. He's standing on the battle platform. But you never see Jedi fighting that much, other than Obi-Wan fighting General Grievous. Which is a great fight, but it's not him beating up battle droids. Speaking of Obi-Wan versus General Grievous, great fight. It makes a lot of sense based on their power levels. From what we've seen of General Grievous, he would run like he always does. Mace Windu said that. He does that in this fight. You see Obi-Wan, a master of defense, like, using his style to stop Grievous' many blades. And it's hard to say that Grievous is, like, portrayed way too powerfully or his style wasn't right when this is the first time we see him. But Obi-Wan, they got right. I like it. It's a pretty creative ending with Obi-Wan losing his lightsaber, even though maybe that's a bit unbelievable that he just drops it. But I guess it's understandable, and it leads to an epic fight where Obi-Wan force pulls a gun, shoots him in the chest, and he blows up, and it's so uncivilized. And then also you get to see Grievous' ship, which is used later, after Order 66, which is another awesome scene, or really it's a collection of scenes where all the Jedi fight, and I say awesome. Like Noah said earlier in the chat, Revenge of the Sith is kind of a sad movie, and that's especially true at the very end. Like, in the beginning, it's just kind of exciting, and you kind of get to see, like, Anakin starting to fall, and turn to the dark side a bit, or at least the seeds are being planted for that. But mostly it's just an exciting movie where you get to see the end of the Clone Wars. Until Order 66, when, like, the tone of the movie just changes, and suddenly Anakin is, like, he was, like, on the edge of the cliff. Now the cliff is, like, turning into a landslide. But, like, there's no going back for him. And I should mention, before Order 66 happens, I do want to cover the Battle of Kashyyyk. Kashyyyk is like one of the coolest planets in Star Wars, in my opinion. Trees are pretty common, right? But giant trees like that, and the Wookiees who inhabit them, and the houses there, like tree houses are, tree houses are just cool. And to see like an entire planet with like awesome tree houses, like so high up in the sky, it's awesome. And then you see the droids coming out of the ocean, and the clone turbo tanks, and even Yoda just standing there. Like Yoda's in that battle. That's pretty cool. You don't get to see Yoda fight very often. And even though he doesn't really fight in this one, I mean, going back to Order 66, Commander Gree does attack him. But he didn't really fight Commander Gree. He just kind of attacked him once. It doesn't really count. But anyways, before Order 66, Mace Windu and CC-10 and Agan Kolar and Kit Fisto all go in and they try to arrest Palpatine. And their strategy here is there's 4 of us and 1 of him. He doesn't stand a chance, which I think points out like one of the biggest flaws of the Jedi during this time is their pride and their arrogance. They didn't even they had no idea how powerful Palpatine was. They didn't know if he had like a backup plan, if he had like clones in reserve or whatever. They had no idea, and yet they didn't like do any scouting. They just went in. They didn't even wait to consult Master Yoda or anything. And it's sad to see that because of their like millennia of success, of not having to deal with Sith, they got so much pride and they feel like they can just go into any situation because it was true for thousands of years. And because of that, I think they were just shocked when Palpatine like leapt at them. And another quick theory about Palpatine's powers is some people have theorized that he can like block people's force sensitivity, which would be super disorienting. Like imagine suddenly someone like uses the like magic powers to make you lag behind like 10 seconds more than usual. You would like be so clumsy because you would just be behind. And that's what it would be like to lose your Jedi reflexes. You're essentially getting taken from supernatural to ordinary, rather than ordinary to less than ordinary. So that would be super disorienting, and they would explain several things. They would explain earlier in Revenge of the Sith when Obi-Wan and Anakin gets basically kicked to the corner by Dooku, and then Dooku picks up Obi-Wan and like throws him over to the like side with the Force. And Obi-Wan does have a pretty weak Force ball. We see this time and time again. But like Darth Maul fighting him, Dooku fighting him, pretty much every fight he loses is someone Force throws him. So even though he does have a pretty weak Force ball, he still shouldn't have been thrown that easily. And Sidious made it sound, and they cut over to him and showed him making the sound. So it's theorized he like blocked Obi-Wan's Force for a second or something. Also, when Obi-Wan took out Darth Maul in The Phantom Menace, it's also theorized that Sidious could have used that power in that case as well. And then obviously the time this is most evident is when he takes out 3 Jedi Masters in like 5 swings, including one at Mace Windu, who he kept alive, or at least either kept alive, and I'll get into this in a second. There's so many things to this movie, so many theories, so much awesomeness to this movie. I'm having trouble talking about it like all at once because I just want to go down all the tangents all at once. Which in itself, saying that I want to go down all these tangents is a tangent. So, yeah, that's pretty crazy. But going back to that power, another option that I thought of while watching, in this last watch right before coming on live, is what if instead of Palpatine blocking other people's senses of like the future, like their Jedi foresight, what if he's just blocking their senses of him, like he's been doing like throughout his entire time as a Chancellor, meeting with Jedi, meeting with, really just Jedi, I guess, and they can't sense him, they can't feel his darkness, like he's such a powerful Sith Lord, and they can't sense him. So he can hide his presence. So maybe he's doing that in combat, and that somehow like doesn't allow them to sense specifically what he's about to do, um, which would make a lot of sense and kind of it wouldn't explain like the Dooku thing, but I mean he could just like break Kenobi's force wall or whatever, or like distract him somehow, and Maul could have just been arrogance, like I attribute it to most of the time, but that's a more plausible theory that doesn't explain quite as much of the inconsistencies, I guess would be a way to contrast the two. So take what you want from that, choose one or the other, I guess, or you can choose the third option of he's just a powerful Force user and really quick. Tell me which one of those three, or maybe a fourth option that I can't think of, do you think is true in the options? How was Palpatine able to take out 3 Jedi in 5 swings, including 1 swing at Windu? So basically, one of the 3 Jedi blocked him once. Moving on to Palpatine versus Mace Windu. How was Windu... Okay, so according to many people, George Lucas has said that Windu beat Palpatine, like fair and square or whatever is how they often say it. I haven't heard like the original quote. I haven't like seen it or anything. I've just heard people say that a lot. So there are a lot of potential reasons why it could be wrong. Like maybe he said, well, Windu beat Palpatine, and that's the quote, and then it's like, well, yeah, but Palpatine let him beat him, so it doesn't really count, even though Windu did technically beat him. And then there's another one, which is like, maybe it just got started, or maybe George Lucas changed his mind, which I think was potentially likely. Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons why that quote could be taken out of context and basically misunderstood. The prophecy misread could have been, basically. And even if it is that quote, I still think it's more, I think the movie should be trusted more than the movie's maker, is basically the thing. And according to the movie, like, it's never explicitly said that Palpatine let Windu win, but considering that Palpatine was able to take out 3 Jedi Masters with Windu doing about nothing, except for lifting his blade and blocking an attack. Like, he didn't attack back, he didn't do anything. Then later in the fight, just to, like, maybe like a third of the way through, Palpatine, like, holds out his lightsaber at Windu's chest, and he's, like, slowly walking forward as Windu's slowly walking backward. And Windu's lightsaber is, like, off to the side. He's totally exposed for, like, a full second. And a second sounds like a very short time, but in the context of a duel, a second is an extremely long time. So, Windu could totally have been killed in that moment. And furthermore, this is like good proof, but again, it's like the, did Sidious strangle the one guy that Darth Vader was thought he strangled in The Empire Strikes Back? It's like, no, because he doesn't have motivation. But in this case, he does have motivation. Anakin Skywalker, his whole goal, well, okay, he has 2 goals. 1, to convince the Senate. 2, to convince Anakin. What is he convincing them of? That the Jedi are trying to assassinate him. How would it serve his purposes if he killed all 4 Jedi in a few seconds? It wouldn't. Even if he couldn't kill them all in a few seconds, how would it serve his purposes to kill all 4 Jedi? That would not make him seem like this weak old man who got attacked by the Jedi. Or even this fairly powerful but not strong enough old man who got attacked by the Jedi. He needs to put Anakin in a position where he feels sorry for him. Just a second, I gotta say something real quick. Okay, I'm back. So tell me your thoughts on that. I know this is kind of a divisive opinion, but I do think that Palpatine threw the fight, at least somewhat. So leave your thoughts in the chat or in the comments. Come at me as hard as you want, as long as you come at me with logic and evidence. I'm open for it. I'm open to changing my mind too. Like, it's just a movie. It's just Star Wars. And I'd rather be right, or I'd rather be correct than to be proven right, if that makes sense. So yeah. Moving on to Order 66. I think it's a great scene. I mean, there's not much, like, there's not like any arguments I can't make. It's not like a theory that I can discuss where I can go into all the proofs. It's just, I like the scene. It's very sad. and it gets the point across very well. Um, you get to see Ki-Adi-Mundi die, you get to see Plo Koon die, which I do wish Plo Koon had been able to use his lightsaber a bit more, because I kind of want to see him fight more so I can put him in more Versus series, because I like him. I like him as a character, I want to use him, but he's not really in very many fights. Same problem with Ki-Adi-Mundi, I suppose, and you see him get shot down. But it would be nice to at least have a little bit more fighting from Plo Koon. But you see him piloting his ship, and that's cool, I guess. You get to see... It's not Eddie Gallia, it's the other one like her. I think... I don't know. You get to see her get shot down on the speeders. You get Plo Koon getting shot down on his starship. You get to see Ki-Adi-Mundi, Ava Sakura. It's just a very sad scene, and the music there is so good. John Williams is... Like... I don't think it's said a lot, but I don't think it's said enough that John Williams is an extremely good composer, and he did especially well with Star Wars. I think, or especially well with the prequels. He did great with the originals. I think he did amazing with the sequels, but I think he did his best in the prequels. But yeah, Order 66 is a sad scene. It's a great scene. I don't think very many people disagree. And if you do disagree, leave your thoughts in the chat or the comments about why you think it doesn't hit. Maybe it's like, well, we don't really know the Jedi all that well, or whatever. You could probably make up some arguments. You could probably, if you feel differently, try and explain why. I'd love to discuss it with you. But moving on, after Order 66, you have, I suppose it's technically part of Order 66, Anakin, storming the Jedi Temple. And people always say they want more of that. Yeah, it'd be cool. I don't know if it needed to be in the movie. And one other thought on that I have about seeing more about that is sometimes it's better to not see and just imagine than to actually see and potentially be disappointed, or be, maybe if someone has a great idea, maybe if you do a story where there's a Jedi who's trying to escape, that could be potentially super awesome. Maybe there's a video game. That's too close to Jedi Fallen Order. Maybe there's a TV show and it starts with the Master and Apprentice escaping, and the Master goes to fight Anakin so that the Apprentice can escape. That'd be pretty cool, right? But if you don't have a story to tell there, I feel like you don't really need to see that. It's just the flashy lightsaber dueling and clones shooting and all that. And I definitely don't want to see Anakin killing younglings. That would just be very disturbing. They handled that pretty well, in my opinion. After that, though, and this is I believe this is about halfway through the movie. Maybe it's a bit further along than that, but the entire Order 66 thing is halfway through the movie. So Vader exists for half the movie or so. Which is always surprising to me, because I feel like he turns at the very end. Yeah, when I just think about it. So anyways, after that, Anakin, he goes and talks to Padme, and I do want to talk about the Anakin and Padme scenes in this one. There are a lot of cringy dialogue, and they're acting like they love each other, but not natural. It just doesn't seem natural. And it doesn't seem like they're being secretive. They're just kind of saying, "Oh, I love you. Oh, I love you too." It's kind of cringy. But at the same time, the way that relationship impacts the story, with how it shows Anakin's fall, how it shows that fear is the path to the dark side, all that kind of stuff. That stuff is awesome. And so I do like it, but it is a bit cringy at times. Yeah, so that's all I really have to say about that. And then the last time they talk on Mustafar is pretty good though. It's good. It makes sense. It's in character. It seems authentic and natural. And leave your thoughts about that in the chat or in the comments as well. I'd love to hear that as well. I keep saying I'd love to hear that. It's becoming something I just, what do you call it? I just throw out that when I'm missing words. Um, like right now. So if you have any ideas about what I should say instead, I'd love to hear it. So, anyways, Anakin goes and talks to Padme, then goes off to take on the Separatist leaders on Mustafar. And the whole scene where Anakin is taking out the Mustafar leaders, and Sidious is becoming the Emperor, and Obi-Wan and Yoda are like in the Jedi Temple, like changing the security record, or not, they're changing the distress signal to warn away from the Jedi Temple, and they are looking at security recordings and taking on clone troopers. That whole section there is potentially my second favorite part of the movie. I almost said my favorite, but then I remembered the end is also really good. There's a lot of good in this movie. So there's a lot of like bad, but there's also a lot of good. Yeah. So that scene, I don't know why I like it so much, but like I think it's the like epicness of it, I guess. The like Anakin is taking out the Separatist leaders that basically were what allowed Palpatine to become the Emperor, while Palpatine is solidifying his place as the Emperor of the galaxy. And that line about liberty dying to thunderous applause is so perfect, and I would say so true, but I haven't really heard of any democracies becoming a dictatorship recently, so I don't know. I would assume that's how it kind of went in Rome with Julius Caesar, is he was elected emperor because people wanted him to be emperor. Anyways, that's how I've had it taught to me. But yeah, so this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause. Great line. Sounds like Padme. Then you have Anakin and Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan is like slowly putting the pieces together and finding out that Anakin is the one who like destroyed the Jedi Temple. Or he didn't destroy the Jedi Temple. He killed the younglings and he attacked the Jedi Temple. Like, he turned to the dark side, and Obi-Wan is just devastated by this. He doesn't want to kill Anakin, or he doesn't want to kill Anakin, but he can't kill Palpatine. So, I mean, the obvious choice, they both take on Palpatine, then they both take on Anakin, but they decide to split up instead. And he's not going to be able to take on Palpatine, so he goes to take on Anakin, and it leads to a great finale. You have a pretty good scene where Obi-Wan talks to Padme, and then Padme goes off and Obi-Wan follows. Good plan, by the way. Good job, Obi-Wan. Then Padme and Anakin talk for the last time, as I said earlier. I think that one's pretty good. The Force choke at the end has always bothered me, though. Like, I don't know what about it, like, I don't know if it's different or something, but, like, when Padme falls down after getting Force choked, it seems like she's just, like, she didn't, like, collapse. She just, like, sat down and then laid down. I don't know. Tell me if you, like, you see that too, or you're not bothered by it, I guess. Tell me all about what you think of that in the chat or in the comments. I'd love to hear it. So, yeah. That whole scene with Padme and Anakin is good, and how Obi-Wan comes out. And there is a question here of what would have happened if Obi-Wan hadn't come out and he had just stayed in there. Would Anakin have turned? And I used to think that he would, but after watching it this time, and this might change next time I watch it, but after watching it this time, I don't think that he would join her. I think because he was getting suspicious, he was getting agitated earlier. Padme was just crying, like saying, like, you're not the man I used to know. You've changed. And Anakin is like, well, yeah, but we have all this power. We can do whatever we want. And Padme's like, yeah, that's the point. You're not supposed to do that. That's immoral. And you're not the person I knew. So I don't think he would have gone. But Obi-Wan did admittedly worsen the problem. But then we get this awesome fight on Mustafar, a lava planet, which is just so awesome. And this is actually one of the best, like, technically, with actual, like, sword fighting and logic stuff. It's one of the best duels that I've seen. And, like, there are some that might be better, like potentially The Empire Strikes Back. That duel might be better. I don't know if Duel of the Fates is better, but what really convinced me of this isn't so much my own like study of it, but even though after knowing it myself, I do agree with the conclusions. But there's a YouTube video called Fight Scene Autopsy, or that's a series. I don't know what the video is actually called, but it's basically a Fight Scene Autopsy for Duel of the Fate, or not Duel of the Fates. Battle of the Heroes, Anakin versus Obi-Wan, whatever he calls it in the title. He probably has it all of them in the tags. But basically, there's this channel called Shadiversity, and he does mostly like medieval sword fighting. He's recently gotten into archery. I say recently, it's not that recently anymore. But he does a whole bunch of medieval stuff, and he sometimes does sci-fi stuff, and he often does Star Wars stuff along with the sci-fi stuff, because it's kind of where those two kind of meet. And he started a series called Fight Scene Autopsy, where he like super analyzes like all the details of fights. And one of the ones he did was Battle of the Heroes, or Anakin versus Obi-Wan, as it's often called. And I do believe Battle of the Heroes also refers to Yoda versus Sidious, which he does not analyze. And I don't think he'll ever analyze a Yoda fight, just because the Force changes that fight so much. His expertise is sword fighting. It wouldn't really apply to Yoda type sword fighting, because Yoda's a different size. He has the Force, all this stuff. He might eventually, but yeah, that's a great video. You should totally check it out. Check out his other ones as well. He did The Empire Strikes Back, Luke versus Vader, and he did the throne room scene in The Last Jedi. But they're great videos, and he's part of the inspiration for this channel, at least a little bit. He's not like one of the main ones. He's not like one of the ones that I'm sort of modeling my channel after. I'm mashing up a bunch of them, but like he's not like one of the main ones. But he is a YouTuber that I really like, and so therefore he is an inspiration for starting a YouTube channel, of course. So check that out. But this fight, beyond just the like physical, like dueling parts of it, like the speed at which it's done, and the like the setting where it is, the lava planet is awesome. Admittedly, there is some like strange dialogue. I do think it kind of makes sense. Like it's not super bad. But like if I were to make like a long 2-hour video trashing the prequels, like as you see, I mean I see them more for the sequels, but that's probably just my content bubble. It's probably just what YouTube recommends to me, because I like the prequels, and I still like the sequels mostly, but not as much as the prequels. So I'm guessing YouTube feeds me more of the sequel-hating content and less of the prequel-hating content. But yeah, so if I were to make a video, I would probably like just wreck this dialogue. But there are some awesome moments in this, especially after the fight, when Obi-Wan is talking about like how Anakin is his brother, and he's supposed to bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness. And the words are not that impactful, but when Obi-Wan delivers it, with the lava sounds, with Anakin writhing on the ground, missing all but his arm, that's like his robotic arm, so now all his limbs are going to have to be robotic, and then his pants light on fire, and that like lights up all his clothes and burns off his hair, and he gets the yellow Sith eyes, and he's just like utterly destroyed. And Obi-Wan is just as destroyed, but not physically. He's destroyed emotionally, because he's been betrayed. He's had to basically kill his brother. Which is another reason this episode is so sad, is because you see them at the beginning and they're like best buddies as they like kill droids. But anyways, you see their relationship, you see like their banter, and it like shows you that they're very close, they're connected, they're friends, they're brothers. And you see that get destroyed by the end of the film, which is part of the reason why Revenge of the Sith is such a good film. And I wish I ended that, because that sounded awesome. But I have one more awesome thing to talk about, and that's Yoda versus Sidious. And I suppose I should probably talk about the after the fight conclusions and all that. in my theories as to what episode 4 will be. Uh, maybe not. So you see Yoda versus Sidious, and this is a fight that's so awesome. It's like the best of both the Jedi and the Sith, and they're going at it like who's gonna win basically. And I love this fight because it just shows you what two of the greatest lightsaber duelists, Force users, two of the greatest, most powerful beings in the galaxy can do when they fight. And another awesome thing about it is just the fighting style. Like, whoever does the choreography for this stuff pays so much attention, especially in Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith just did a great job with that. There are a few scenes in Anakin and Obi-Wan's fight that are like, what were they thinking? But for the most part, it's just brilliant. You get to see, and with Yoda versus Palpatine, you get to see more than just lightsaber dueling, even though that's pretty awesome. You also see Force lightning, you see Force throws, you see not telekinesis, Tudomenis. Although you do get to see telekinesis, Force throws. You get to see Force pushes, which is basically a Force throw, but straightforward. It's awesome. And at the end of it all, you see Yoda fail, which comes back later in The Last Jedi. Failure is the greatest teacher. You get to see it kind of come back later in Empire Strikes Back. Not directly. He doesn't mention his failure or anything, but he's in exile. And it's cool to see that, I guess. Not as cool as the Anakin and Obi-Wan fight, but I thought I'd mention how awesome it is, just because it deserves a mention for how awesome it is. And then the movie concludes, and it's actually a pretty long conclusion. I believe it's 10 minutes or so. I wasn't paying too much attention to the times, but it's a pretty long conclusion. You get to see Obi-Wan and Padme go off to Paulus Massa, and Luke and Leia get born, and then you get to see them split off. You get to see them plan where they're going to go, and then Yoda tells Obi-Wan about Qui-Gon and his Force Ghost thing, which will probably come back later in segment 3. And then you get to see Leia on Alderaan. You get to see Luke on Tatooine. Yeah, it's just a lot of stuff. And then while Padme's dying and giving childbirth, you see Anakin becoming Darth Vader, and then screaming about Padme not living, and Sidious's telling him he killed Padme, which, third Palpatine theory of the movie, what if Palpatine was draining Padme's energy and putting it into Anakin, and that's how he survived? Personally, I don't buy into this one, because I feel like it's a bit ridiculous. There's no precedent for it. Unlike Palpatine's other ones, they're not similar to other powers, especially in terms of power. If Palpatine could just suck the life energy out of one person from one side of the galaxy and put it into another person, you would think he'd be using that power a lot more often. Oh, we had 10,000 dead stormtroopers last week. Bye-bye, rebels. It doesn't make sense. At least it doesn't make sense to me. If you've got a more refined explanation, or if you want to go into detail about that theory and try and convince me, and again, I'd rather be correct than to be proven right. So leave your chats and comments and thoughts wherever you can right now, because some people are watching live, some people are watching not live. So and I don't mean they're dead, they're just not live, I guess. But yeah, anyways, Palpatine sucking Padme's life essence and putting it into Anakin doesn't make too much sense to me. But it's a good theory, even if I don't think it's true. It's an interesting thought. But that's pretty much it for Revenge of the Sith. Just overall, this is such a good movie. It's so sad. And it's not just sad is the wrong word. It's just overwhelming, I guess. It's tragic. That's the word. It is tragic. It shows the brilliance of Palpatine. It shows the humility of Yoda. It shows the what's the word? Tenacity of Obi-Wan, the pride of the Jedi, and it shows the fall of Anakin. Um, so yeah, that's my thoughts on Revenge of the Sith. Great movie, but let's move on to the next segment, which is how powerful is Darth Maul? So how powerful is Darth Maul? Darth Maul is like a pretty powerful Sith, and really, when you ask this question, you have to also ask a whole bunch of other questions like what time, what weapons, and the other thing is, what are you comparing him to? I could say, well, Maul is about 9,000 power, but you don't know what that means unless I say that Obi-Wan Kenobi is 8,800 power, or I should probably say 9,500, but it depends on the time too, right? Like, yeah. So I would say if Darth Maul is 9,000 power, Obi-Wan is 9,500 power, but then you also have to ask, like, why is Darth Maul lesser? Because I think that Darth Maul is the better duelist, the better Force user, but he's too prideful and he lets his arrogance control him. And again, you have to ask the time, because I think by the time of the Twin Suns episode, Obi-Wan has actually surpassed Maul in terms of dueling ability, and potentially Force ability. I'm not certain about that one, though. At least not combat Force ability, because then there's the whole other aspect to where Palpatine, a Sith Lord, right? He's super powerful. He can take on Yoda, but that's not his most impressive feat. His most impressive feat is him becoming Emperor. And how does he do this? He doesn't do this through sheer power. He does this through his cunning. He does this through his more subtle Force powers, like his Force Cloak, probably some Force mind tricks and manipulation, that kind of stuff as well. So you can't just ask how powerful they are in combat, who have they beat. You also have to ask, like, how do they beat them? What do they do out of combat to prepare? And like a whole bunch of questions. So let's start analyzing Darth Maul. So in terms of his cunning and like his out of combat like powers, basically, he is actually, from just the Phantom Menace, you would think, oh, this guy's a brute. He's an enforcer. He's like not super smart, but he's very skilled with like lightsaber combat and Force abilities and all that kind of stuff. And maybe you wouldn't even say Force abilities, although notably he does use more Force powers than Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon combined in their duel. And I don't remember the exact how many times he uses it. I think he uses it like once or twice, and they use it 0 times. But the point is, he uses the Force more than most Jedi, even though his demonstrations aren't quite as powerful, although we'll get to that later. So from the Phantom Menace, you might not think he's very smart, but then in the Clone Wars, he like builds up this criminal empire, and then Sidious like takes him out. He like his empire is, sure, there's probably some remnants. He could probably go collect some and live, like not quite as powerfully, but it's mostly destroyed, right? But then after that, even after like Sidious takes him out and he's like lost most of his power, he builds up again and becomes like leader of the Crimson Dawn, and then he's like just as powerful, right? Like, and then later you see him in Rebels, and I guess he gets killed by Obi-Wan, so it doesn't build up from there. But you see that he's actually pretty cunning. He learned from his master. He may not be as brilliant. He may not be as ambitious. He wants to do things in his own lifetime, not just not like the Sith like of the Rule of Two, who are planning for years to come. But he is ambitious, he's cunning, and he's very manipulative too. Most of his manipulation isn't as subtle. Like, he's not like Sidious, where he's going to slowly groom Anakin over like, what is it, like 15 years before finally gaining like the most powerful Jedi for the dark side, or at least that was the plan. He's not that manipulative, but he does like take over Black Sun. He does take over the Pike Syndicate, and he doesn't do it the same way Palpatine would, where Palpatine would use like the Senate. He would use funds. He would do it the more subtle ways. Darth Maul just goes in and just threatens them basically, and they're forced to join him. Which I think is perhaps it's a sign of less intelligence, but at the same time, it's clearly effective. So like maybe it is the more intelligent choice, even though it shows less subtlety, um, which I think is oftentimes something people misunderstand subtlety for intelligence, including probably me. Um, like, it's probably pretty likely that in a lot of my versus duels, I'm like, well, this guy seems to be a lot more skilled and better tactics because he just doesn't go straight all in. He, reserves and tries to counter and all that. But really, sometimes that's not the best strategy. And I think Darth Maul understands that, and so oftentimes he just goes all in and destroys someone. However, there's a huge flaw with his whole strategy. And number one is that he doesn't really learn that much. He continues with this flaw. He doesn't really seem to gain any other skills. Sure, he improves his skills. He gets better. He gets more powerful, and he gains more influence and power. But he doesn't change his strategy at all. And the problem with his strategy is it's not so much a problem with his strategy as he can't keep to his strategy because he's too prideful. Every time he thinks that, best example, and the most obvious example of this, in The Phantom Menace, he kills Qui-Gon Jinn, a Jedi Master. He pretty easily defeats Obi-Wan Kenobi, a Jedi Apprentice, and he's just standing there taunting him, not with words, obviously. Darth Maul doesn't speak. We know this from the movies. Well, that may be a bit of an exaggeration. He doesn't really speak that much. At least not in the movies. He's taunting him by just standing there and swiping his lightsaber. He thinks Obi-Wan is defenseless, and his pride, his belief that Obi-Wan is completely defenseless, Obi-Wan has no hope against him, that he can survive anything Obi-Wan tries, is what gets him, I would say, killed, but he actually survives. Which is another very important thing to note. Darth Maul survives getting cut in half and falling down a giant hole, which we don't see the bottom of. That is so incredible. Would he be able to, I'm not sure what his threshold is and why he was able to survive that, but not his injury against Obi-Wan. How can you survive that wound? Which I know you could survive because Dave Filoni brought it back from the dead, but in universe, that's an incredible feat. So in The Phantom Menace, specifically, so to break down how powerful he is and what his different skills are, I'm going to talk about his speed, his strength, his endurance, and his durability, and also his skill. Skill would be how smooth he fights, basically, and his positioning and leverage, all that kind of stuff. Maybe we'll break down skill into smaller stuff. So he seems to be pretty strong. I would say stronger than Qui-Gon. He seems to overpower him most of their clashes. Stronger than Obi-Wan then as well. So I would compare him probably. He's probably not as strong as an Anakin for Revenge of the Sith Anakin, or a Luke, but he is pretty strong. And I don't think he gets much stronger. And this isn't strength as in just better physically. This is strength as in how much can you lift or how much can you push. It's literal strength. I don't think he gets too much stronger over the course of his life. He's probably stronger at some points than in others. Near the end of his life, I think he actually got quite a bit weaker. Especially because on Malachor, I'm assuming he was pretty malnourished, and he probably just didn't recover from that. He doesn't seem to be as muscular as, well, you can see from this picture, which I suppose isn't canon, but this is supposed to be from when he is, it's before he joins up with the Mandalorians, but after he joins up with Savage. In that time, he's pretty muscular. I always see him as muscular at that time, and clearly this artist does as well. So he's pretty strong. As for speed, I think speed is one of his greatest assets, and his speed is actually bolstered by his skill. He is fast, but one of the biggest reasons why he's so fast is because he's smooth, and because he attacks with like many different. He attacks from many different ways. He has like headbutts, kicks, punches. He has two blades on his lightsaber, at least in the Phantom Menace, and throughout the most part of his life, other than, well, when this picture is taking place, he has um, two lightsabers, or I should say, two blades. He has his normal blade and the dark saber, or he has a double-bladed lightsaber. Sometimes he has three, like during the time of from what would it be? It would be from the end of the Clone Wars season 7. I suppose he loses his double-bladed lightsaber there. I wonder where the dark saber is at the time. I'm getting on tangents. The point is, he has a lot of different directions he can attack from, and he does it very smoothly. He chains his attacks together very well, which is super important and makes you a lot better. Something my wrestling coaches always say is, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, speed kills. And it's so true. By slowing down and, in actual combat, you might not want to slow down, but you might not want to just rush through things and be super disjointed. You want to go smoothly so that you actually end up moving faster than you would, even faster than just focusing only on speed. And it also gets you more leverage, because you're getting into the right positions and that stuff, which is more true in wrestling, but even outside of wrestling, it's still important to have leverage. It's still important to move smoothly and get your positions in a smooth way. So his smoothness and his speed work together to make him very quick, very hard to beat, and his strength obviously makes it if you were to battle someone like Ahsoka or a Yoda, and you just baseball bat swing them, you might be able to knock them down. You might be able to stop their momentum. You also might have them dodge and you overshoot, and then they just take you out. But if you hit them hard enough, say like an Anakin could stop their momentum. Not so easy with Darth Maul, because he has the strength to back up his speed. In addition, Darth Maul could not only keep up with your fast attacks, but he could stop them and turn them back on you, unless you're a super strong one like Anakin, in which case his speed would basically overwhelm you and force you to be on the defensive. Or at least that's the idea. Obviously, if you can be stronger and faster than Maul, or just way stronger and just not quite as fast, but he does seem to be fast and strong and have a pretty good balance of the two. As for endurance and durability, as I mentioned earlier, he survives getting chopped in half. There is not much that can take him out. He gets his leg shot off while running away from Hondo and Obi-Wan, and he keeps running. He keeps fighting through so much. And one of my favorite, other than his fight with Obi-Wan in the Phantom Menace, one of my favorite demonstrations of this is his fight with Pre Vizsla, where he gets just beat up by just a whole bunch of stuff. And he keeps fighting throughout. And it's pretty cool to see that a tough character with a lot of endurance and so much tenacity, it makes you respect him, even if even if you don't admire his mentality and how selfish and vengeful he is, you could at least admire his tenacity. So Darth Maul, very tenacious is the word. So as for comparing him to other characters to kind of demonstrate his power, obviously it changes throughout his life. In the Phantom Menace, I would say he's more skilled than Qui-Gon Jinn, but I do feel like people overestimate Qui-Gon Jinn. I would say he's about as skilled as perhaps a Clone Wars Anakin, early Clone Wars, not quite, maybe season 1 Anakin, but above episode 2. And you can totally disagree with me on this, but I'll just leave a few examples. Episode 2 Anakin, maybe even episode 2 Obi-Wan is probably about that level as well. For Ahsoka, I would say he is probably later Clone Wars Ahsoka skilled. Ahsoka, I think, is probably pretty underestimated. At least her younger self is underestimated. Even as an apprentice, she's she keeps up with Anakin pretty well. And even in the second Battle of Geonosis, she takes out more droids than him. Although Ki-Adi-Mundi takes out even more than both of them, so good job, Ki-Adi-Mundi. But anyways, in the what's the next one? In the Clone Wars, in like the early Clone Wars, I don't think he actually changes that much throughout the Clone Wars, but I would say he doesn't get that much better, but he does. Okay, when he switches legs, he gets better. When he has his like Night Sister legs, he's probably about as skilled, I would say, as maybe later, like near the end of the Clone Wars, Anakin, or Episode 3, Obi-Wan. And sure, he does lose to Obi-Wan, but that's because Obi-Wan has Ventress's help, Adi Gallia's help. And the first time, what does he have? I forget. No, the first time is Ventress's help. The second time is Adi Gallia's and Hondo's help. Which is cool to see Hondo team up with the Jedi again. I love Hondo. He's great. But anyways, I would say, yeah, he's about as skilled as like an Episode 3 Obi-Wan or a late Clone Wars Anakin. Not quite like Windu level, but he's getting up there. Probably more powerful than... I'm trying to think. There's like this... I feel like Anakin and Obi-Wan are always like in their own section of power where they're right below like Windu and Yoda, but like right above the other masters of their time, I guess. So yeah, Anakin and Obi-Wan level. Maybe like a Luke Skywalker from Revenge of the Sith level. Then during Rebels, I think it changes quite significantly. As I mentioned earlier, I don't think he was as strong, and I think that's because on Malachor he has like nothing to eat, so he loses his muscles. Right? You can't if you're not eating, you lose weight, and that comes not just in the form of fat, it also comes in the form of muscles. So he's a lot weaker. But I do think he got more skilled, and he's definitely stronger with his like mental force powers. He seems to have an understanding of how to manipulate people using just the mental force powers. With giving Ezra visions and manipulating him to like do the vision to help him find Obi-Wan and help. Well, Ezra also found Obi-Wan, I guess. So they both go to Tatooine. But I do feel like he isn't as strong. He might be a bit faster, but I would say he's about the same skill level. I don't think he's quite as prideful, but he's still prideful. So yeah, Darth Maul doesn't really get that much better throughout his life, but he does get a little bit better. But that's mostly in terms of lightsaber dueling. One other thing I forgot to touch on earlier is his force powers, and in combat he doesn't do too much, but outside of combat or when he doesn't have a lightsaber, which is part of the reason why I love how they took his lightsaber away from him in the Clone Wars, in Clone Wars Season 7, and he takes out all his clones with the Force, and then he like takes out the hyperdrive of the Venator class Starcruiser. That whole thing is awesome, and it represents his power so well. He doesn't demonstrate it very much, but it's there, and you can see it's there through those scenes. And I think it's still there in Rebels. I don't think he's quite that powerful in The Phantom Menace. I think he really improved his connection to the Force, while surviving his wound from Kenobi. Like, he had to. He doesn't have legs. He can't rely on his physical powers. He has to use the Force more. And I think he gained a stronger connection to it there. And probably an even stronger one on Malachor, of course. I think he just gained more understanding of it on Malachor, and more just connection to it on what is it called? What other trash planet was that he goes to? I think it's something Prime, which is pretty common, I suppose. But yeah, that's how powerful I think Darth Maul is. Pretty powerful. About as skilled as Obi-Wan at pretty much every turn, but very arrogant, and so he often lets that get the best of him. But moving on to the next segment, which is what is a true Jedi? So, when people talk about true Jedi, a lot of times they like to give examples, like Qui-Gon Jinn or Luke Skywalker. But I just want to start with like classifying the three opinions that I see most often. The first one is they don't care. This is like pretty much most people, I would assume. Um, People who haven't finished Star Wars don't care. People who are just casual fans don't care. There's probably a whole bunch of hardcore fans who just don't care, and they're more interested in the ships, or they're more interested in the specific characters, and they judge things on an instant by instant. They don't ask, what is the ultimate right and wrong? They just ask, what is the right and wrong in this situation? Then there's the second kind, or the second major belief, and that is a true Jedi uses the light side and the dark side. And then there's the third belief, which is a true Jedi uses just the light side, but not like the Jedi in the prequels. It seems the one thing that everyone can agree on is the Jedi of the prequels were flawed. Which, yes, I also agree with this. I'm part of the third group, so I'll try and like present them as biased, but also give arguments as to why my opinion is correct. If I couldn't do that, then why would I choose that side, right? So I'm going to choose that side. So a lot of times when people give examples, they say like Qui-Gon, Luke Skywalker, Anakin. I also like to give like Yoda, Ahsoka, Plo Koon, even Luminara to some extent, although many people would probably say Luminara doesn't deserve that. Obi-Wan as well. And a lot of these are represented on the screen. You can see Aayla Secura's and Ki-Adi-Mundi there as well. And frankly, I don't know those Jedi as well. But here is how I would describe a true Jedi, is selfless, and there's not really a good word for it. It's like peace, but it's like an inner peace, but it's also like a like basically like a negotiations rather than fighting, but it's also, yeah, it's this weird concept that I can't quite put into words, but I think the closest word to it is peace. But it's not like they're like hippies, they're Jedi, right? Like, it's honor, it's an honorable peace, and an inner peace, and a confidence. One important thing to note is their confidence, because fear is the path to the dark side. And so when people talk about the true Jedi being both dark side and light side, I don't know. You know what? Leave your thoughts about that. If you believe that, or I should say, especially if you believe that Jedi or really just the balance in the Force means that you need to use both the light side and the dark side. Leave why you believe that and what you think that exactly means in the comments or in the chat. But for now, I just want to talk about the idea of a true Jedi that I have. Basically, this is someone who is selfless. So instead of, and the other thing is, their inner peace also applies to like attachment. So they're not like attached to anything. They're confident. Like, I don't know how to explain it. They don't have attachments. Attachments are forbidden. And that's not to say that you can't love things, or kind of. Your compassion is encouraged, and I love this scene in Attack of the Clones when Anakin is explaining to Padme, and he's like, well, you know, attachments, they're forbidden, but compassion, which I would define as unconditional love, is encouraged, because it's essential to a Jedi's life, which is true. And also, if you pay attention and understand the meaning of that, or at least what I believe the meaning of that is, then you see that his relationship with Padme is actually not allowed. By compassion being unconditional love, what that means is that it's not conditional. It's not like, oh, you're pretty like Padme, I will like you more. Or, oh, you're a great friend like Obi-Wan, I'll like you more. Or, oh, you're expensive and you're a cool house, I'll like you more. And, you know, like, Jedi don't have attachments to worldly possessions, to people. And of course, that's kind of impossible. Jedi apprentices have masters. They have, like, the Jedi Temple, which is their home. They're going to be attached to stuff. But the point is, the ideal is no attachments, and at the very least, not letting their attachments control them. So I think, like, the Jedi shouldn't get so caught up on making sure that no one in the Order has attachments, or at least no attachments that they feel like they can't go without. For example, it's fine to have an attachment to your master because that's necessary, but it's not fine to have an attachment to your wife because that's not necessary. I feel like that's the wrong way to go about it. Instead of saying you can't have attachments, I should say, or I would advise, try to limit your attachments and make sure that they don't control you. And as I said during the Revenge of the Sith segment of the live stream, Yoda and Anakin, they talk about Anakin is having these visions of Padme, and Yoda's advice is learn to let go of everything you fear to lose. And so many people see or like hear this, and they're like, "That's such bad advice. How can you just tell him to let go? Like, how can you do that?" And well, that's the Jedi way, is letting go of your attachments so that they don't control you. So I don't know how people can say, "Well, that's just not possible." Like, that's the life of a Jedi isn't supposed to be easy. The point of being a Jedi isn't so that you can, like, I don't know, like, have a comfy life and have cool powers and lift rocks and stuff. It's a hard life where you make hard decisions. And in fact, in the Last Jedi novelization, Luke tells Rey that a Jedi would... So basically, here's the story. There's a group of raiders attacking these, like, villagers. It's like the weird fish villagers that you see repairing the Jedi temple stuff on Octo. And there's, like, they're raiding, and Rey's like, well, we gotta go stop them. And Luke is like, nope, a true Jedi would actually leave them. Because if you raid them, or if you stop them now, they're just gonna come back next week with an even greater force, with even more pillaging, and even more death, and even more suffering. And you're not gonna be here next week, so don't stop them. And well, it's kind of portrayed in the book like that's the wrong opinion, but that's the right opinion. Like, sure, you're preventing short-term suffering, but by preventing that short-term suffering, you're causing an even greater long-term suffering. So really, it is the right path, even though it's portrayed as the wrong path in the book. And I think that is or at least that's how I've always viewed the Jedi path as being, as always trying to, like, without any attachments, without any emotions, without bias, basically. You're trying to prevent suffering. So when Anakin is willing to sacrifice the entire Jedi Order, the entire Republic, all that stuff for Padme, that is the opposite of a true Jedi's choice. But when Yoda, or what's an example? When Qui-Gon is, I don't know, I can't think of a good choice. Let's say the only way to stop, like, a bomb or whatever is to sacrifice yourself. A Jedi would sacrifice themselves. But another thing to keep in mind, though, is Jedi, they have great powers, they have this great responsibility, but they have these great powers. So if they know they're going to use them selflessly. So if they get killed, it could be worse than having, like, 2 other people get killed. So there is that to keep in mind as well. Because those 2 other people could cause harm and they could cause good. So I do think that a true Jedi isn't like they're going to just sacrifice themselves for anything. But they will sacrifice themselves if it's the logical choice. Which is why a Jedi can't be controlled by fear or attachments, because they're going to be blinded by their passions, they're going to be blinded by fear, they're not going to want to die if they're scared of dying, of course. And sometimes a sacrifice is the best choice. So Jedi can't be afraid, basically. And again, this isn't ideal. I don't think that, like, Luke wasn't scared of the Emperor when he threw his lightsaber aside. He just thought, well, this is the only way. Like, I can't take on the Emperor. I can't let myself turn to the dark side because I am the last of the Jedi. And frankly, I'm not quite sure if Anakin, or if Luke's choice there was done in the Jedi way, even if it had a good result. I do think you could make an argument that it's not, or that it's a more gray Jedi approach. But you could also make the argument that he did do it out of larger choice, which is that, well, he can't take on the Emperor, If he kills Darth Vader, that's not going to get him anywhere. His only choice is to hope that Vader turns on the Emperor, which eventually, of course, works. Another thing about the Jedi is it's not just their peace. It's I already kind of talked about that. Peace and selflessness, basically, and lack of fear, I guess. And that's what makes up a Jedi. A Jedi, as I was saying, is willing to sacrifice themselves, and you can't do that if you're selfish. You can't do that if you're not at peace, if you have attachments, and that's why Jedi aren't supposed to have those. Contrast that to the Sith, who are selfish and passionate, and often they are controlled by fear, like Anakin was, and that's how he turned to the dark side, like Maul was. You see him like super afraid of his master, all that kind of stuff. You often see Sith like convincing people to turn to the dark side through torture, and that's ultimately driving them through fear of torture. You also see them doing it through pain, which obviously causes an emotional response. You see them do it through vengeance, which I think Maul is like the picture of vengeance. So maybe I should have called this segment, "What is a true Jedi and a true Sith?" But I feel like just saying true Jedi is better. But I really need to talk about Sith to contrast that to what a true Jedi is. Not only are Sith passionate and controlled by fear and anger and all that, they're also controlled by selfishness. Jedi, they're selfless. Like, if it's not in their best interest to sacrifice themselves to save an entire planet. However, if they're not thinking about themselves, or at least the ideal is that they're not, so sacrificing themselves for the planet makes logical sense. However, a Sith wouldn't do that. They would think only of themselves. Again, Anakin speaks a great truth when talking to Palpatine in Episode 3 with the opera scene about Darth Plagueis. And, well, Darth Sidious is like, well, what's really the difference between the Sith and the Jedi? They're basically the same thing, right? Or maybe it's not the opera scene. But whenever it is, Anakin says, well, the Sith are selfless. They think inward, only of themselves. And that's one of the main points, is that Sith don't think about others, they think only about themselves. So, all this is to say, this is what, like, a true Jedi is three things. Selfless, peaceful, and, what's the last one? Brave. Whereas Sith are the opposite. They're selfish, passionate, and driven by fear, which I guess is part of their passion. Contrast that to, like, the Grey Jedi idea, which is that Jedi are somehow selfish and selfless, which, again, people say, oh, you can't be selfless, because if you did that, then you wouldn't be able to eat and you would die, right? Because you're not taking your own food. But it's actually selfish, or it's not that it's selfish, it's that it's not selfless to kill yourself if you have great power and you're taking on great responsibility, like a Jedi is supposed to be doing. It's actually in the best interest of most people if the Jedi survives. So it's not selfish to eat or whatever, or to preserve their own life, basically. Another counter to, like, the morality of the Jedi way is, like, their unemotionalness, how, like, they, like, don't feel anything, they don't have empathy, and it's not that they don't have empathy, it's that they're not controlled by it, which, just like in the villagers getting attacked by raiders example from The Last Jedi, like, that's, it might be a short-term benefit, like Rey wanted to do, which was fueled by her passion and her emotion, her sense of justice. That might be a short-term emotion, but stepping back, stepping out of your emotions, and thinking logically for a second, you realize that this isn't actually the best path. And so really you have more empathy, and instead of feeling yourself with something like passion, you feel yourself with something like logic, which I think is better even if it's hard and it seems cruel. Like, Jedi can seem very cold and dismissive. Like, some of them, like Mace Windu, even seem like downright cruel. Like, they're actively trying to like tear you down, which in the case of Anakin could actually be true. And quick theory on that: Mace Windu has like a purple lightsaber. He's very justice oriented. He's a very powerful Jedi. Some people have theorized that he thought that he was the chosen one. And he might not know who his parents are. He might think, oh, maybe my parents, maybe I don't have a father, like, it's possible. And then he might, like, consider himself, I could be the chosen one, and maybe not tell anybody that, or maybe just tell Yoda that. But deep down, he believes it. And then when Anakin shows up and is like, well, I'm the chosen one, guys, maybe that's why Windu is so, hard on him, because he thinks, this guy's taking my place. I'm the chosen one. And that's just a quick theory. It doesn't really have any supporting evidence. It's just a potential. I suppose the supporting evidence would be his unexplained rudeness towards Anakin. But yeah, just a quick theory to think on, I guess. But going back to how Jedi can be abrasive, Windu, Luminara, in what is it, the episodes 5 through 8 of the Clone Wars Season 7, Rafa and Tresa arc, I believe Rafa says that their parents were killed in a shuttle crash, and there was, I believe it was Luminara. I think she said a green-skinned Jedi or something. Anyways, some Jedi was forced to choose between crashing a ship on a huge landing pad with a bunch of people, or crashing it into a wall which had Rafa and Trace's parents on the other side, and she chose to kill the 2 people rather than the many people. And it's portrayed in the episode that's the wrong choice, or it's the bad thing. That is the right choice. And yet, because Luminara, or I believe it's Luminara, and this actually goes very well into Luminara's personality, because Luminara just goes up into them and is like, yeah, sorry, I had to make a choice, it was 2 or a whole bunch of people, so I chose the 2, right? Sorry, your parents are dead. That can seem really cruel, even if it's the best choice. That was her best choice. So then there's the whole problem with the prequel Jedi. What I've been talking about so far is the ideal of a true Jedi, and I contrasted that to the Sith, but you can also contrast it against the Jedi of the prequel era to kind of see some of the problems that they were having. And the biggest one is and at least this is the root of most of their problems, is, well, okay, there's two problems they have. Number one is their pride. They were very arrogant. They, as seen in their strategies with they just go in, they expect to win. They don't have any major threats for thousands of years, which I suppose the High Republic is going to change, which I'll actually be reading the High Republic book soon. I'm pretty excited, but I got to get through a whole bunch of other books first. I suppose I don't have to. I want to get through a whole bunch of other books first, because I have those ones from the library, and the High Republic one I can listen to whenever. I listen to them on audiobook, by the way. So yeah, I'll be probably doing a review of that pretty soon. Maybe after episode 4 next week, or maybe episode 5. Who knows? But I'll be doing a review of that pretty soon, hopefully. So the High Republic will probably change that. But the point is, they haven't had a major threat like the Sith in thousands of years. So their strategies have gotten a bit lax. They don't have the best strategies. And when they do have good strategies, it's not because they have these clever, thought out strategies like a good war general would have, or a trained war general. Instead, it's someone like Anakin comes up with this bold idea because he's got this bold personality. Their strategies aren't educated, formal, general strategies like Admiral Yularen or Tarkin or whatever. They're just very bold, very reliant on their Jedi powers, and sometimes just downright stupid. For example, in the Battle of Geonosis, they basically put all their clones in a line and say, go shoot. At least that's what it seems like. And if you want to learn more about Jedi strategies being dumb, I don't know if they have any dedicated videos about this, but the channel Generation Tech has a lot of Star Wars videos, and they often talk about how the Jedi aren't trained as generals, so they probably shouldn't have been put in the position of generals. But speaking of their position as generals, that goes into another problem of the Jedi Order, is the Clone Wars. Like, the Jedi are supposed to be peacemakers. Why are they fighting? But why are they generals in a war? And the reason is because they are too reliant on the Republic. Like, that's all they serve the Republic over the will of the Force. Some Jedi, of course, didn't, and it's kind of hard to say how many there is. But like Jedi, like Anakin, oftentimes would he'd serve himself sometimes too. Again, selfishness, a way of the Sith. But a lot of times he would serve the will of the Force, or the will. He would serve the Republic, but he would do it in maybe a different way. Jedi like Ahsoka learned from this and seemed to like adapt it more, especially after she left in season 5, I believe, of the Clone Wars. Maybe season 6, I don't remember. But anyways, Ahsoka seems to become seems to become more in tune with the Force after she leaves the Republic, and that's because the Jedi of the prequel era of the Clone Wars were too reliant on the Republic. They just listened to them for what they should do next instead of listening to the will of the Force. A Jedi like Qui-Gon Jinn seems to be, at least in the minds of most people, like the best example of a true Jedi, and I believe this is because he doesn't serve like the will of the Republic at all. He serves somewhat. I mean, Chancellor Valorum did ask him to go talk to the Trade Federation, and he did that. But he also like picks up slaves. He rescues Jar Jar. He does a lot of things that would be frowned upon by the Republic. And he does this because he follows the will of the Force, not the Republic, which I think is perhaps one of the biggest flaws of the Jedi of the prequel era. And because they served the Republic, they joined a war, which goes against most of their ideals. Instead of joining the war, they should have tried to solve the problems that the war was creating, those being obviously destruction, there wasn't really that much like conscription or anything, but there were probably a lot of economic problems and social problems that divide between the Separatists and the Republic. Instead of becoming generals, they could have become negotiators. That potentially could have ended the war. They should have investigated the origin of the clone army more. That's a pretty big mistake they made there. And it did cost them their vote. But yeah, it's just they were too reliant and too trusting of the Republic. One thing that I want to point out that often gets brought up against the Jedi is, in fact, it's brought up in The Last Jedi, is Luke is basically like, well, the Jedi aren't actually that good. For one, and I don't remember the other points, but one of the points he makes is, at the height of their powers, they let Darth Sidious take over the Republic, and they let themselves get destroyed. And that's not a very good point. For one, it doesn't address any morality point, and he's trying to convince Rey that the Jedi shouldn't exist for moral reasons. That doesn't address any moral point, that just addresses the fact that they got defeated once. Two, that ignores the fact they were reigning for 1,000 years, and because they were reigning for 1,000 years, sure, they got comfortable, sure, they got reliant on the Republic, but if it hadn't been for the Sith, who had actually survived and been planning for 1,000 years, and maybe a few of their plans went wrong and they had to start over, but still, 1,000 years of refinement and planning, they had no chance. Like, maybe they could have, like, investigated the clone army more, maybe they could have done, maybe there's ways they could have gone around it, but Palpatine had so many contingency plans, they had basically no chance. So the Jedi didn't kill themselves as much as they got killed, and then, like, 20 years later, maybe 25 years later, they destroyed the Empire. Like, the reign of the Sith is like a blink of an eye compared to the reign of the Jedi. And that's, like, something that argument completely misses. Yeah, so I just wanted to, like, dispel that argument, because, I've heard it before in the comment sections, and it's brought up in a movie, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. So if you actually like believe that argument, and you still do after this, I'd love for you to chat and comment and basically explain why like the points I made don't make any sense. Because it's not that I like being proven wrong, but I like being right, or I should say correct. And if you can correct me, that would be great. So yeah, that the Jedi of the prequel era were too trusting of the Republic and too prideful. They got comfortable basically, and I kind of hope to see some of this start, and maybe like Jedi who aren't as prideful, or maybe aren't as reliant on the Republic, or maybe you start to see why they start to rely so much on the Republic in the High Republic area, or era, not area, kind of an area of time. Anyways, yeah, I'd love to see that in the High Republic. Excited to read that, and leave your thoughts about True Jedi. But before I stop talking about this, I do want to talk about who some of the True Jedi I think are. What I mentioned repeatedly, Qui-Gon Jinn. He follows the will of the Force. Obviously, he's not perfect. I believe there's something about him on Felucia or something that's alluded to. And that seems pretty un-Jedi-like, from what I can tell. But for the most part, he is striving after the ideal of a true Jedi. Another one that often gets brought up, and I mostly agree with, is Obi-Wan. And I do think he's too reliant on the Republic and maybe a bit prideful. I think he's convinced himself that he's humble, and because he thinks he's humble, he's being prideful about his humility, and that allows other areas. It allows him to become prideful in other areas. Another one that gets brought up often, mostly by me, I suppose, is Yoda. And I think Yoda is also somewhat prideful, but I think he also recognizes this, especially by the end of the Clone Wars. And I also think that he serves the will of the Republic a lot, but I feel like he's still better than most Jedi. Then there's another one I want to talk about, which is Luminara Unduli, and I don't think she's closer to a true Jedi than most of these that I'm going to mention. But she's interesting in that instead of following like the Jedi way, like Qui-Gon Jinn does, where she's following the spirit of the code, she's following like the Jedi code. Like she's very strict about the rules, which I think is interesting. Another one is Plo Koon, and he, I think, exemplifies especially the peace, and I think the peace and the bravery are kind of interlinked. It's like peace, honor, and bravery all mixed into one word, I guess, or one feeling. Like, yeah, it's like focusing on logic rather than on fear, anger, and like love, I guess. Love as in like specific biased love towards one person rather than compassion. And I think Plo Koon exemplifies this. He's always very calm. He's always very reassuring. Yeah. And then another Jedi I think is pretty close to a true Jedi, although I do think his true Jedi-ness is exaggerated, is Luke Skywalker. And I do want to add, from what we've seen, he doesn't seem to be super close to a true Jedi, at least in my opinion, how I see true Jedi. In The Last Jedi, obviously, he fell away from the Jedi Order. He does come back, and I think when he comes back, when he reasserts himself as Luke Skywalker the Legend, and in The Rise of Skywalker, I do think that he is very much like a true Jedi in many ways, especially in terms of his bravery, and even, yeah, pretty much in every way. He's selfless, and he has inner peace. He is brave, honorable, and motivated by compassion rather than passion. But before that, I don't think he's quite as Jedi-like as many portray him. For one, he almost turns to the dark side, but he overcomes that, and even though he overcomes that, and it shows great character growth, and it shows how much of a Jedi he's becoming, I don't think it shows that he is like a true Jedi. I just think he shows that despite struggling, he is still close enough to a Jedi to, say, be a Jedi. Another one I want to mention is Ahsoka Tano, and as I said earlier, she originally was just this apprentice, But after leaving after leaving the Jedi Order, she starts to sort of like detach from the Republic and sort of gain a closer connection to the will of the Force, and I think fix a lot of the problems with the prequel Jedi for herself specifically. So I think she is obviously brave and honorable. One thing I do think that she struggles with is letting go of her attachments to, say, Anakin. Um, for example, big one here is when Darth Vader, or when she's like, Darth Vader says that he killed Anakin, and she's like, well, then I'll have my revenge. And Vader responds, revenge is not the Jedi way. And Ahsoka says, I'm no Jedi. And I think in that instance, she let her attachments control her, which, you know, understandable. I certainly am not a perfect Jedi and don't expect anyone ever could be. But other than a few scenes like that and her attachments to really mostly just Anakin, but also to other characters like Lux Bonteri, Padme Amidala, the whole story arc with the Rebels of Onderon kind of showed a attachment to people. Obviously with Lux Bonteri, but also just with protecting the Rebels with what's her name, Steela, I think, and Saw Gerrera. Yeah, that whole arc showed a bit of her flaws, but overall, I think she is pretty close to being a true Jedi. And most Jedi, I think, are close, but as a whole, they have these problems that Darth Sidious was able to exploit, and that is, of course, their pride. They aren't able to see that the Sith are returning and they're more powerful than them, or more powerful than they realized. If they just let go of their arrogance and truly thought for a second, why do we have this clone army? Like, where did we come from? If they just took some time and away from their arrogance and thought, they might have been able to solve some stuff. And another one, if they didn't just rely so much on the Republic and only follow what the Republic said instead of following what the will of the Force said, then they probably wouldn't be able to be like destroyed as easily as they were during the Clone Wars. And I say easy. It took them 1,000 years to take out the Jedi. So that's what I think a true Jedi is. Compare that to the Sith. I compared it to the Jedi of the prequel era. I compared it to many of the most truest Jedi, I guess, of the time. But with that, I think that's all I have for this stream. I think it's been a long one. Looks like it's been about an hour and a half, which is longer than I've had in a while, which is awesome. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining me, Noah, and the other person who joined. Great to see you live, and I look forward to live streaming next week. Oh, if you have any ideas about like segments I could do in the future, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat. Or you can just comment on any of my videos. I'll see it, unless it's like 10 years from now and I either don't have a channel or have way too many people or whatever it is. Basically what I'm saying is there could be a situation where I don't see it, but more than likely if you comment or chat, I'll see it. But with that, may the Force be with you, always.